What if there were no runways, just water, wild, untouched nature? And every decision is yours. This is where pilot dreams in Europe come true. Join us on our journey to a seaplane rating and find out everything you need to know and what it really costs to fly in the raw, remote Swedish wilderness. Our journey begins with an airline flight from Munich northbound to Sweden's capital, Stockholm. Ever since our Alaska trip in 2024, seaplane flying never really let go of us. And during our journey through Scandinavia, all the way up to the Lofoten Islands, we fell in love with the raw nature and wilderness of Sweden. At times, it almost felt like being back in Alaska. So when we got the tip to do our seaplane rating right here, the decision was easy. Touching down at Stockholm Arlanda Airport, the gateway to a country shaped by lakes, coastlines, and endless wilderness, we are welcomed by typical Scandinavian weather: low clouds, gray skies, and a bit of rain in the air. Robert, a super friendly local pilot who recently completed his own seaplane rating, picks us up. He has a house right by the lake, and before anything else, we get a proper Swedish welcome with fresh kanelbulle. And suddenly, the evening sun breaks through the clouds. That's Scandinavia. The weather can challenge you, but just as quickly, it gives something back. The drive to Lake Klemingen takes about 2 hours, and the last part leads us deep into the forest. It doesn't take long until we spot wildlife along the way. Red deer, wild boar, and even wolves live out here. It's raw, untouched, exactly what drew us back to Scandinavia. During the drive, Robert already tells us more about the seaplane rating and the Maule we'll be flying over the next days. He ferried the aircraft here himself, and is already waiting for us, docked right in front of his house, right on a lake. And then we arrive, a remote, peaceful place completely surrounded by wilderness. And right in the middle of it, a floatplane, like straight out of a picture book. Robert starts preparing dinner right by the lake as the day fades into evening. Here, we also meet our flight instructor, Bernd, from the nearby Östra Sormlands Flood Club. Then the next day starts at this incredibly peaceful, almost unreal place. No runway, no noise, just nature everywhere. And just like that, this quiet place by the water becomes the start of something much bigger. But how did we end up here? On our trip to the Lofoten Islands in 2025, we flew back through Sweden. And in Optand, near Östersund, we met a Cessna Skywagon owner who does a lot of bush and seaplane flying. He recommended doing the seaplane rating in Sweden, especially if you're looking for freedom in flying and want to understand why this place is often called Mini Alaska. He also pointed us to this flight school, located about 80 kilometers southwest of Stockholm. Normally, the club operates in Aviation Husky, but in 2025, it was undergoing a major overhaul and recovering. So instead, we completed our training over the next days in a Maule, the very aircraft that once belonged to the bush pilot we met. The one who gave us this tip in the first place, and is now owned by a German pilot who also rents it out. But more on that later. After a thorough pre-flight check, Bernd shows us the area on the map, and we plan our flights to nearby lakes, followed by a detailed briefing. It's quite windy, with noticeable waves on the water, making ground handling especially challenging. One of the key basics is to always stay aware of wind and water movement, especially when getting on and off the dock, and to accept help whenever it's available. We take turns flying and help each other with docking, and Robert is not only the perfect host, but also always there to help. He completed his seaplane rating in the same year, which brings us to the costs. Let's take a look at the prices of the flight school and the flying club. The annual membership fee is around 194 euros. The standard hourly rate for the Husky is usually 2,610 Swedish krona, around 240 euros. There is also an upgrade option to about 5,000 Swedish krona, roughly 460 euros, which gives you a discount of 500 Swedish krona, around 46 euros, on the hourly rate of the Husky. Since the Husky wasn't available, we had to rent them all instead, at around 270 euros per hour. Our flight instructor charges 750 Swedish krona per block hour, roughly 70 euros. So the base flying costs are around 194 euros. We'll break down the actual flight hours later. While one of us is out flying, the other gets a chance to slow down back at the house by the lake, enjoying the September sun and refreshing the theory. We had already completed the theory test beforehand, but we keep coming back to the FAA Seaplane Handbook to stay sharp. One thing they really emphasize here in Sweden is reconnaissance. Since you're allowed to land on almost any lake, taking the time to properly assess the area is absolutely key. From above, it's about reading the wind direction, spotting obstacles, and understanding the environment. Are there boats, fishermen, or swimmers? Are there hidden obstacles in the water or just below the surface? Because out here, every landing area is different. And that's exactly what makes flying here so special, and what really draws us in. It's probably the same reason Dirk, the owner of the Maule, decided to keep the aircraft here in Sweden. He bought it, left it on the Swedish register, and based it here to fully enjoy this kind of freedom. He also rents the Maule out, which makes the whole idea even more tempting for us in the future. Getting a seaplane off the water sounds simple, but it all comes down to one thing: getting onto the step. We set 25 inches of manifold pressure and 2,500 RPM with 2 notches of flaps about 35 degrees in the Maule. On water, finding the right attitude is key. You want to get onto the step efficiently, reducing drag and allowing the aircraft to accelerate. From there, it builds speed until it's ready to fly. But more on that later, including cockpit views. To really make the most of this kind of flying, the setup around it matters just as much. Having a place right by the water with direct access to the dock makes everything so much easier and turns the whole experience into something truly special. And that's where Robert comes in. Not only is he the perfect host, but his house by the lake creates exactly that setup. A place where flying, training, and relaxing all come together. Which also brings us to the question of accommodation and overall costs. We pay 300 euros per night for a luxurious double bedroom, including a spacious private bathroom, pick up from the airport and drop off in Stockholm. Served breakfast, served lunch. Swedish Fika with coffee in the afternoon. Served dinner. All drinks included. Access to stand-up paddleboards, Wi-Fi, the lake right in front of the house, perfect for a swim at any time, and not to forget the dock, where we can park the plane right in front of the house. As the day comes to an end, everything starts to calm down. The light gets softer, the air smoother, and for a moment, time seems to slow down. As the wind settles, we get the chance to practice almost glassy water landings. Judging height becomes difficult, so we rely entirely on our parameters. For us, that means 65 miles per hour, flap 1, and a steady descent rate of 150 feet per minute. What a way to end this beautiful day. During the morning pre-flight check, draining the fuel system is one of the most important steps, and we quickly see why. Almost every day, we find water in the fuel. Of course, pumping out the floats is also part of a thorough pre-flight check. When leaving the dock, it's standard practice not to be strapped in or wearing headsets yet, so you can exit the cockpit quickly if needed. Once the engine is running and we've cleared the shoreline, there's plenty of time to get settled. Go through the checklist and let the engine warm up. During that time, we also take a close look at the wind and wave conditions, as well as the departure and arrival areas, before deciding on the takeoff direction. As mentioned before, one of the key goals is getting onto the step efficiently. At first, full back pressure is held to keep the nose high and reduce drag while accelerating through the water. Then, the pressure is gradually eased to find the optimal planing attitude, something you start to feel very clearly after a few takeoffs. Once on the step, the aircraft is stabilized on the step, where it rides on the floats with minimal drag, and acceleration increases noticeably until it lifts off. After liftoff, we continue the climb, and reduce power and RPM once safely airborne to minimize noise and impact on the surrounding area. On takeoff and climb out to the northwest, the length of the lake gives us plenty of options in case of an engine issue. We also fly past Wang Soi Airfield, the home base of the Östra Skärmlands Flight Club. We slowly start to understand why Sweden is called Mini Alaska. Not just because of the freedom, but also because of the countless lakes that remind us of Alaska. Some of them we've already used intensively over the past days for different procedures. Emergency landing practice, and takeoffs and landings. Our flight instructor Bernd keeps emphasizing how important the mindset is. You have to think like a seaplane pilot. So with every lake we fly over, we train ourselves to read the environment, spotting obstacles from the air, memorizing things like power lines, and understanding where the wind is coming from. It's time for us to head south towards the fuel station, and it's also interesting to fly with 3 persons on board the Maule and feel the impact on performance. As it has been over the past few days, it's also very windy and bumpy today. After landing, we prepare to be able to exit the aircraft, quickly unbuckle the harness, take off the headsets, and carefully check for any obstacles along the shoreline ahead. We also go through the docking procedure and split up the tasks. This lake is quite special. We're not only sharing it with cows and wildlife, there's also a small dock and a buoy out here. After refueling the aircraft, there's one essential step: draining the fuel system to check for any water in the tanks. One of the things we practice during our training is picking up a buoy. In windy conditions, this can get pretty challenging. You have to get in very close before shutting down the engine, and then everything has to happen quickly. Out of the cockpit, onto the float, moving all the way forward, grabbing the buoy by hand, and securing it to the front cleat. And one important rule: the buoy must never end up between the floats. We take the opportunity to go for another lap and practice a few exercises, including different docking maneuvers. Among other things, we also need to learn how it feels to handle the aircraft alone at the dock. That means precise planning and execution. Sometimes even coming in with a tailwind towards the dock so that the pilot side of the aircraft, the side where you get in and out, ends up next to the dock. Timing is critical. When to shut down the engine, one final input on the rudder, then stepping out onto the float. From there, stepping over onto the dock and immediately securing the aircraft.
Tell me what it feels like to break free.
After refueling, with 3 persons on board and changing wind conditions, the difference becomes very noticeable. You really feel every extra kilo, especially on the water. Takeoff runs get longer, acceleration feels slower, and everything requires more anticipation. That's where it becomes even more important. You're constantly thinking ahead, reading the water, the wind, and always having a backup plan. Navigation here feels different. It's all about reading the landscape. During our training flights, we also get familiar with the surrounding area, which is essential for the Checkride. The examiner is part of the flight club, and organizing the Checkride was really smooth and easy.
Tell me what it feels like to be true.
After a short break, we continue to a smaller, more challenging lake where we practice beaching, and in these conditions, it's anything but easy. With the wind, everything comes down to timing and judgment. You have to know when to shut down the engine, how much speed you need to reach the shore, and when to bring the water rudders up. Too slow, and the wind will push you off before you even get there. Once the engine is shut down, it's the same as with the buoy. You move quickly, out onto the float, and getting the stick ready to maneuver the aircraft in the shallow water. Because the last place you want to end up is stuck in the shallows, in the bushes, or even worse, hitting hidden obstacles like rocks. The beach we're training on is quite narrow, surrounded by obstacles on all sides. And yet, it's incredibly beautiful. And there's something special about standing here with a seaplane, right in the middle of nature. After all the bush flying and training on remote lakes, we leave the wilderness behind for a completely different kind of stop. We fly on to the next highlight, a Swedish Fika in a castle. It's famous for the largest cake buffet in Northern Europe, with over 60 different varieties. But even getting there is something special in itself. We fly past Marifod, a small town right on the water, with Gripsham Castle sitting directly on the shoreline, making for an incredible sight from the air. Taxingi lies on a quiet fjord-like bay of Lake Mälaren, and we follow the forested shoreline to the east. As always, reconnaissance is key, and here we need to be especially thorough, since it's our first time in this area. We also have to plan for beaching the aircraft. That means not only checking for obstacles in the landing area, but also reading the wind direction in the bay and looking out for swimmers, people in canoes, fishermen, or any other potential hazards. In doubt, we rather fly a few extra orbits to make sure everything is safe. Because one day, we might be out here on our own, renting a seaplane and landing on lakes we've never seen before. And in Sweden, there's one more thing you always have to respect: protected areas, nature reserves, seasonal restrictions. Especially during nesting season, the rules here are just as important as the flying itself. And this is also something we're learning as part of our training. We determined the wind and set our landing direction, as well as the landing area, this time between the small, idyllic islands scattered across the lake. And this is exactly what we enjoy and what challenges us as pilots. We prefer not having predefined water runways, but instead the freedom and at the same time, the responsibility to make those decisions ourselves. What's also interesting here are the local wind effects. With the many small islands, you can get channeling and shifting wind directions, which also affects the wave patterns. And with the size of the lake, there's generally more movement in the water compared to smaller, more sheltered lakes. We prepare for the beaching, double-checking the area, confirming our visual references, and accounting for wind drift. After bringing the water rudders up, it's time to jump out onto the float and grab the stick to maneuver the aircraft in the shallow water. For parking, the aircraft is then turned around and secured using lines tied off on land.
Look ahead, the sea is calm, and I know we've been through a lot, but just wait.
It feels almost surreal to just park the seaplane on this idyllic sandy beach, and then walk through the forest up to the castle for coffee and cake. After a relaxed Swedish Fika, it's time to get going again. Lines off, back onto the float, and using the stick to maneuver the aircraft out of the shallow water over the sandy bottom. The wind has eased a bit, but it still requires full concentration and you have to be careful not to hit any sensitive parts of the aircraft with the stick. Once we're clear of the shallows, it's back into the cockpit and a quick engine start.
The longer we stay here, our boots get stuck in the mud. Let's pack up a life, baby, and call it a night.
In the afternoon, the sky clears once more and the sun breaks through. We take to the air again and simply enjoy the calm, golden light of the Swedish late summer, soaking in these final flights together with our flight instructor. And with just enough wind still around, we get to practice something unique: sailing. Using the wind alone to control the aircraft on the water, rudder to control direction, aileron into the wind, elevator controlling the pitch attitude and wind exposure. A perfect way to ease into the evening, and to let the last day before our check ride quietly come to an end.
Come lay on my chest. You can find a little rest from hiding.
Then it's time. The fourth and final day has arrived, the day of our check ride. As always, we start early in the morning, preparing and checking the aircraft, and of course, draining the fuel system. And once again, we find a few drops of water. Our examiner places a strong focus on the pre-flight check and wants us to go through each item in detail, what we looked at, and what really matters. Along the way, he also revisits some theory questions, like the construction of the floats and how the water rudders and control surfaces work. In addition, he also asks for a few key figures from the aircraft's flight manual. Equally important to him is thorough flight planning. He doesn't just want to see weight and balance, but also whether we've checked our intended lakes on maps or satellite imagery for obstacles, and whether they lie within any protected areas or other restricted zones. And, of course, reconnaissance. Assessing unfamiliar lakes and deciding whether a safe landing was possible, we were required to carry out landings on different lakes in all flap configurations, including flapless as well as tailwind and crosswind landings. We also had to demonstrate aborted takeoffs and handle emergency scenarios such as engine fires and engine failures at various altitudes. In addition, we were required to perform both power-on and power-off stalls, sailing, catching a buoy, and securing the aircraft to it, as well as docking. Finally, we even had to maneuver the aircraft onto a narrow ramp. This required careful control of the approach angle in relation to the wind, but even more importantly, precise timing of when to shut down the engine. The goal is to avoid carrying too much speed while still maintaining enough momentum to reach the ramp. In many cases, a short burst of power right as you reach the ramp helps lift the nose slightly and guides the aircraft smoothly into position. Robert took great care of us between our check rides, providing excellent food and creating a relaxed, easygoing atmosphere. After the oral exam in the morning, both of our skill tests each took around 2 to 2.5 hours, including briefing, the flight itself, debriefing, and completing the paperwork. Unfortunately, the drone you can see in the video crashed into the water that day, and all the footage was lost. Even so, after successfully passing our skill tests, we were able to enjoy the moment in the evening sun even more. The demanding tests made it all the more rewarding, and the examiner costs were around €416 per person. After 4 days at the lake house south of Stockholm, Robert took us back to the city, where our paths separated. We spent one night in Stockholm to do a bit of sightseeing the next morning before flying back. We'll get to the total cost in just a moment, but we couldn't skip this. Under clear blue skies, we explore Stockholm, take a boat tour through the archipelago, and let everything we've experienced over the past days really sink in.
Silent music and shimmering gold, strangers feeling about to explode. I held my breath to make sure I didn't say something weird.
We make our way through the city by bus, stop at a food hall, and finally take the Arlanda Express to the airport for our flight back to Munich. We didn't include expenses in Stockholm like the hotel, boat tour, bus tickets, and the Arlanda Express in the cost breakdown. So here's a closer look at the actual costs of the Seaplane rating. We start with the membership, €194. Flight time in the Maule, 5.6 hours at €270, totaling €1,528, including the roughly 1.5 hour check ride. Instructor time 5.6 hours at €70, around €392. The skill test, €416. The Ostro control fee, about €194. Accommodation right by the lake 4 nights in a double room, €1,200 total, €600 per person. And finally, the airline flights €219. That brings the total to around €3,542 per person. It's hard to define a fixed number of required flight hours. For us, it was about experiencing different conditions and really building the confidence to fly a seaplane on our own. And what you get in return is hard to put into numbers. Flying without runways, making your own decisions, landing on lakes you've never seen before. Experiences like this stay with you. And for us, this was more than just a rating. It was the beginning of something new. Subscribe so you don't miss our next adventures.